How to Train a Happy Mind is a production of the nonprofit Skeptic's Path to Enlightenment. Our podcasts and programs are free and ad-free, thanks to the generosity of listeners like you. If you've benefited from the interviews and meditations we share, please consider supporting the podcast with a tax-deductible donation at howtotrainahappymind.org. And if you'd like to meet weekly with me and other like-minded seekers of authentic causes of happiness in our chaotic world, you'll also find the links there to join our Train a Happy Mind community or get a copy of the How to Train a Happy Mind book and audiobook that features a foreword by the Dalai Lama. I'm Scott Snibbe, and this is How to Train a Happy Mind. We talk a lot about meditation in this podcast, but there are many other things we do in life that can serve the same purpose of connecting with the deepest part of yourself to build a stable, happy mind. Spending time in nature, doing yoga, exercise, music, writing, and art. For decades before I learned to meditate, art was my meditation, and I didn't feel like my mind was balanced until I made a few drawings that day. My friend John Simon Jr. feels even more strongly about this. So much so that he wrote a whole book about it called Drawing Your Own Path. He and I got to know each other a long time ago because we're both artists who work with computer software as our medium. But ironically, we got together recently at his home in New York State to talk about the ways that drawing the old-fashioned way with our hands can serve as a meditation. So John, I'm really excited to be here in your studio to talk about your book, Drawing Your Own Path, 33 Practices at the Crossroads of Art and Meditation. You and I have been friends and colleagues for a long time. You get to the point you're not quite sure how long we've known each other, at least a couple of decades.
Yeah, sure.
So thank you for joining me for How to Train a Happy Mind.
It's just a pleasure to have you here and to have you at my house. It's a great thing. Yeah, we've known each other for a long time.
So ironically, you and I are both software artists, but we're here to talk about the oldest form of art making, which is drawing, and how that relates to meditation. I'd love to start out just by asking you, how did you start out integrating a drawing practice with meditation?
Yeah, I like to say, wrong question, right answer.
Yeah.
I was trying to write software that was, I guess, would be like a artificial creative intelligence, although that we didn't really call it that. We knew about AI, but it's not like it is now. But I was making software artworks that were making images that were continually changing, never repeating patterns and that sort of thing. But every time you write a piece of software, it has, boundaries, it has limits. I wanted to try to find a software that could recognize the limits and exceed the limits, sort of do something outside of its boundaries and somehow improvise. I did try all the conventional A-life and cellular automata and all the conventional approaches that at that time were being talked about for doing creative computing. But of course, every set of rules has its bounds, and I was unhappy with that. So I wanted to find out how I created. If I let my hand just improvise and just mark, and if I could observe that and somehow discern the rules, the unspoken rules that I was using in improvising, that would give me a basis to code something. I could use that as an algorithmic basis to code something. So I started to watch myself make marks, and I just do the practice that I do now, which is just be open and let the hand start moving and don't exert any judgment and just let it roll. Like Paul Klee talked about a line on a walk for a walk's sake, just letting the line find its own way. So it's the wrong question because there's no single source. Like your creative mark might come because your arm is tired, or go a certain way because you're angry, or you might have a thought that interferes. So creativity is coming from like your whole life. But it was the right answer because that type of introspection of your motion is a insight meditation. You're watching what's coming up, you're thinking about what's coming up. So I inadvertently, in thinking I was doing this kind of like computer artwork, began meditating. And when you're doing drawing and you get into flow, it's just this kind of incredible feeling. I started to have really good responses to doing the drawing, and I kept doing it every day. It kept on until I came across some more opening experiences and awakening experiences that I couldn't explain. And that's when I went on a kind of a long search to figure out what was happening. Was psychological, or was it somehow mystical, or was it spiritual? And I found the Progressive Insight Path and Theravada Buddhism was at that time a very good map. And kind of found some, I call it the crossroads of art and meditation. It was kind of like I was wandering in the wilderness over here, and I found some locations, and then I found a teacher in Vincent Horn and kind of got it lined up.
And you have a daily drawing / meditation practice. Can you talk about what your daily practice is, and how long have you been doing this for?
I've been doing it for a long time. I use these 5x6 cards. I try to put no rules on it. I want it to naturally arise. So yeah, I mean, as a formal thing, I have the daily drawing bee weekdays. So it's Drawing Your Own Path community. I have a 11 a.m. to noon, Monday through Friday is a time. I call it creative co-working. That's a very consistent thing. But I would draw all day if I could. And my daily practice for the most part, and I often use my non-dominant hand to start, and I just sit quietly. And it's like if you sit in meditation, you can watch your breath. And if you don't breathe, or if you sort of slightly suppress breathing, your body will breathe. And you can do the same with your hand. You can kind of sit and wait, and at some point maybe it's just a muscular reaction or whatever, but you get started. And then I just allow that hand to go. I just allow it as much as possible, watching it. If I get too much in my head, thinking about what I'm doing or what am I drawing or why am I drawing, I just shift attention to the senses, like how tight I'm gripping the pencil or how hard I'm pushing against the paper, and just kind of do that as a way of refocusing. It's like the Shinzen Young see, hear, feel. Yeah, it's a noting practice. So you're just noting the sensory inputs. And that kind of gets the drawing going again. The unconscious mind, I find, especially when you work with the non-dominant hand, has stuff to say, like the part of your brain that can't speak, the nonverbal, has a lot to get out, but it can't get it out through words. So stuff comes up, you'll end up making a drawing of something, and you'll be, oh my God, that's this feeling that I had. You recognize it. I had this feeling, or it's this thing I saw that was suppressed, and it comes up.
You've been doing this so long as a practice, let's say for 25 years or so, and longer as just a general artist. But how, since this has become a formal practice, how have you seen your mind change over the years and decades from practicing in this specific way?
Yeah, it's a lot of self-knowledge, self-acceptance, kindness. When I started in the meditation, when I said, I guess it's meditation I'm interested in, I was like all these wisdom traditions and insights, and it sounded like I was going to gain these things, this kind of stuff. And there were parts of it that said healing, and I'm not interested in the healing, I'm fine. But it turned out that there's just a lot of things buried. Regrets and all kinds of things that you just have chosen to forget about, that over time, when I get open and I'm allowing, emerge. And then because it's a strong mindfulness practice, like the muscle is there to just allow it, and then it opens and self-liberates, or it lets go. And that's been one of the greatest things, is the kind of inner calmness that grows and inner peace that grows, because you allow thoughts and things to emerge that you didn't even know you were keeping from yourself. So I just love to see and encourage people to let themselves express themselves. And I think it's more than just a healthy thing. I really think it's a necessary thing. And I think people who don't actively pursue a creative practice act creatively in some way, even if they're not saying I'm doing something creative. But if you're choosing furniture for a room, or where it should be arranged, or you're making dinner, or you're deciding what to wear, these are all very creative decisions, and people do them all the time. And I just think it's one of the totally healthy things to recognize how much of your world you're constructing.
Yeah, in our culture, we often say, especially American culture, we frame it as choices we're making. But I think, like you're saying, it not only makes more sense, but it's more beneficial to think of all the decisions we make in our life more as a creativity, like an expression and a flow, right? There's something really powerful reading a book by a friend, by someone you know, because often they reveal things about themselves you didn't know. You have to wait to read their book. And you are really honest in the book about your own struggles with ambition, ego, anxiety, competitiveness in your career, and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about how meditation, drawing as meditation, helped you deal with those kind of difficult feelings, what we call delusions in Buddhism?
Yeah. The turning point comes in 2009 when I'm drawing these cycles, and I'm so invested in these cycles. And the cycles are these kind of like sets of, I call them phylogons, but they're, like squash cubes. It's a shape that became persistent in the work. And I always pay a lot of attention to persistent symbols in the work. I was thinking about the shape that the phylogons made, the interior shape, and then one set of them I did that looked like a portrait, and I'm thinking, what if the drawing is really about the internal shape? Like, I've gone to all this length, but really it's the negative space that's really trying to express itself. And when I saw the portrait, I realized the emptiness of self. Like, the person that we construct is really all the stuff we surround ourselves with.
Unpack that for a sec. That's a big sentence to say. When I saw that, I realized the emptiness of self.
It took about 2 years to integrate, something like that. That's when I really started to work with the teacher, because it was really unsettling to see. This was the day before.
Okay, that's what sparked you.
That was the day before.
Okay, so the day before, for anyone who's listening, it's an image that looks sort of like circularly stacked uneven tiles with a kind of geological and a hole in the middle.
Yeah, and this kind of weird shape. And I started to think about, what if the drawing is really about this shape? Like, I'm going to all this length, but what if it's really like what has to be expressed unconsciously is really the shape? And that's the way it can get itself to come out.
The negative space.
The negative space, yeah. And then the next day was that one.
So it's quite powerful because it's not that complicated of an image. It's almost like a wreath. But it's the inside, like the collar is in the shape. You see, it's like the shape of a head or a face.
Yeah.
And then looking back at the image sparked this realization that you're kind of everything but what you thought you were, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This thing that you call your ego or yourself or whatever is really just this kind of elaborate construction of the universe.
Yeah.
Like this vortex or this stability and this flow of your parents and nature and the history of the universe and nutrition and all these things that come together to make this, for temporary time, your existence, and then comes apart again. What was really there then? It was all those things together. So I saw that in the center of this vortex, in the center of this in this circle. That's a central realization in Buddhism. But I realized it immediately, and I saw the truth of it immediately. And then it took a long time to figure out that a lot of people had seen that and what it meant and where it fit in. And
what you're saying is that the realization happened not while you were drawing, but later looking at the drawing. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
And this is something my closest teacher, Venerable Rene, he was telling us the same thing recently, because he says very often the realization comes between the meditation sessions. That like there's some integration and discovery that you don't quite understand in meditation. And then later, analyzing it is when you have that realization.
Yeah. And I have in the daily practice that I describe in the book, there's a whole choosing your kind of drawing technique and then practicing your drawing technique. And then there's what I call reading the drawings.
Yeah.
And that's when you come to those, you make up stories and you try to integrate and tell yourself what it's about. And that's when it came about and that's why I make the drawing and I post it every day, and then I write a little bit. Maybe it's a caption, maybe it's a whole story, but that's part of the reading process. And once I started that, it just like moved it so far forward. And I think because you have that reflection, that moment, because then you have to decide, you have to actually bring it from this kind of nebulous, sketchy set of lines to a few words. And you have to really decide at that point, this drawing is about this. Now, it's not about that. It's about everything. Mm-hmm. But at that moment, that's the word that you decide. So for that moment, that's what it's about. And then when you look back, you realize where your mind was. It helps you look at where you were and what you were thinking about, that you thought it was about that then.
There's a incredible sophistication in the way you approach meditation and drawing practice in your book, because something many people don't realize is there's many, many types of meditation. And this one struck me a lot the fact that you go back with the openness to your own work, to say, what was I trying to say? What did I discover? What did it mean? What did I think it meant at first? Now what do I think it means? Can you talk a little bit about that practice?
The one experience that started it, I was in college. I was at Brown freshman year taking drawing, Art 10, I think it was. And I had never had much art training or any art classes in high school. In Louisiana, there was not a lot of art taught. And I was also very ambitious for science and math. But when I got to Brown, I was like, I'm going to take an art class. I took Art 10. And the first day there's the nude model in the class. And I'm this 18-year-old guy from Louisiana. So it's like very shocking kind of what's happening. And I tried to learn the proportions of the figure and the edges and shading, and I try to really make a good drawing. And those drawings were of this figure. So that was the meaning of it, was I was drawing this figure and the subject was the figure. Pack it away, go away for the summer, come back, bring all the work back out again because I'm getting ready for the next year. I look at it and I'd gotten older, I'd had more experience, and I didn't see a picture of this nude model. What I saw was a vulnerable 18-year-old.
Yeah, you saw yourself.
I saw who I was then. I realized, that's also recorded in it, in the same lines.
Yeah.
Was the whole history of who I was at that whole time. And I realized how much gets encoded.
Yeah, they say that about writing. You can't help but reveal yourself, but I think it's the same with drawing too, right?
They say every drawing is a self-portrait.
You were talking a little bit earlier about what you call your marking practice. Your book has 33 exercises in it, and an early one is a marking practice that I was doing with my daughter on the plane on the way here, actually. We both really enjoyed it, and it really connected with her because she really reflected it, and she was describing it to other people when we were meeting them during this last week. But it's an idea to just directly convey what you're feeling into a mark without labeling it, without thinking about it. I wonder if you could talk a little more about that, because in some ways I wish so much I had known about that practice, because I grew up with parents who were artists, so I was always drawing. I loved drawing, and I loved abstract art because I learned about it. But this actually made me see, I wish I had been exposed to this practice earlier, because to just completely let go, just translate your experience into marks, it's very powerful. So can you just talk a little more about that practice?
Yeah, well, you described it really well. If you feel uptight, and then you just let the uptightness control the pencil, or you try to relax and move that through the pencil. And then I find the feedback is quite good. Like sometimes when you're angry and you do it, you just it's just funny when you see the marks, because it expresses it. It gives you a way to be heard to yourself, or to say something to yourself. So you can do it when you don't know how you feel, and then look at it and go, I look confused or whatever.
Yeah. You talk a lot about the importance of not caring how, quote, good your drawings are. And I remember Chuck Close came to campus. I heard him speak. He came to Brown when I was there. And he said he was making very good work in grad school of a certain copying, abstract expressionists and things. And his professor told him, if you're making good work in grad school, you're doing the wrong thing. Right? But can you talk a little bit about why it's important not to care how good your work is, or even make bad work?
Yeah. I think Chuck Close was a quote. He said, if it looks like art, it looks like someone else's art. There's this whole level of what society has conditioned us to believe art is, and there's a whole level of value in society that we have to deal with. And but creative expression and knowing yourself is really different, on a different plane, and so that it can interfere if you bring in too much judgment, or you bring in too much expectation of value. But I would say I do sometimes sit down and draw a thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with making a realistic drawing or trying to make it really look realistic, which will align better with our societal values for what a drawing should be. It's more like concentration practice. Realistic drawing is a kind of concentration practice. And then what you find is that it's not in the overall method of letting go, but in the tiny shading and details where you start to break a thing down into its shapes, and then the shapes down into textures, and the textures down into lighting. What we say at Drawing Your Own Path is the only bad drawing is the one you don't make. So it's like every drawing will have a value and be valuable to you. And if you don't practice, that'll be a problem.
Now, all this said about the non-judgmental approach to drawing as a way to get to know yourself, you also talk about good drawings.
Yeah.
And you even talk about realizing the folly of all the time you spent trying to make an automated computer drawing machine, that the difference between you and the machine was that you wanted to make a good drawing, right? So now that we've said it's okay to make anything,
yeah.
what's a good drawing?
So first of all, you love what you're doing, and you're having fun or whatever. You're fulfilling a need, maybe a need to do it. I call it like the upside. That's the upside. So then you can start to weave elements together, and you can start to look for what I'd call like resonance amongst composition and material. There's like a resonant simultaneity that happens when you get your meaning and your marks and your materials all to kind of talk to each other. They're not the same, but they align in a way. Like Wayne Thiebaud makes a painting of a cake, and he applies the oil paint to the surface of the canvas like you would frost a cake.
Yeah.
And so the meaning and the materials and the textures are all in some beautiful alignment, you know.
And the medium is the message.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. They talk to each other. Is it a cake? Is it a painting? There's those kind of overlaps. And I think that you want to find, the resonances in your life where you're drawing a picture of something, and it turns out that that thing that might have been arbitrarily chosen has a deeper meaning. And those are good drawings.
One of the most common questions I get as an artist, and I bet you too, that people ask, is where do you get your ideas?
Yeah.
Right? And I think these practices in many ways answer that, right? This is where the ideas come from.
Yeah,
right?
well, that's the whole question in the beginning. What's the source of this creativity? Could I go back into myself like the source of the Nile River and find a spring from which I would just hook up the computer and make drawing after drawing?
Yeah.
It doesn't come back to a single spring. It opens to an ocean. Like every element of your life comes in. Where does it come from? It comes from absolutely every experience you've ever had, every interaction, every sensory input that's come somehow is going to sum total to the thing that you want to draw, the choices you make, the textures you like, the materials you like, what you think you have to do, why it is you want to make a drawing. They're all this kind of like interwoven story.
There is a spiritual dimension to it too, for lack of a better word. I heard my friend Dan Levitin, maybe you've read some of his books. He's written books about neuroscience, music, creativity. He had a TV show about it where he was talking to Sting. And he says to Sting, what do you think it is about your brain that makes you so different and so capable of making these original songs and melodies? And Sting says to him, the question itself makes me very uncomfortable because I don't know. And I'm nervous to even ask the question of myself because I'm worried it'll go away.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot.
He also had an interview with Stevie Wonder. It was the same thing. He's asking Stevie Wonder, what is it about your brain that makes you come up with these original patterns? And Stevie Wonder says it's a gift from God.
Yeah.
So what would you say about like that mystery and unknowableness of creativity?
Yeah, I love that. Sometimes dancers will say they're not dancing, they're being danced.
Yeah.
There's a feeling sometimes that I'm not drawing, that like it's just kind of coming through. And I do get that question a lot when I say to people, if you learn mindfulness and drawing, you can discover maybe your voice or what you have to say or why it is you're making, and people have this fear. And I've been through that desert where it's kind of, I know too much, but it's the practice carries you. And where does it come from? That's great. But this assumes in some way, that question assumes in some way the solidity of the self, which we were talking about before. And if you don't see that, or you see the emptiness of self, or you see how self is a construction, it's the confluence of my parents and how they valued art, and how my grandparents, and we saw art in the home, and we got taken to museums, and so that creates a value, and why you should do that, and the things you learn and the discussions you have. It's all the threads that come together to make it. And one of those threads is, I don't know what you call maybe consciousness or the ground or God or whatever, however you want to put it. If the universe is an aware thing, and since we're part of it, then it's an aware thing because we're aware, or we think we're aware. We have this sense of awareness. the specialized cells of this want to know itself, and this is how it can, one way it can be done, is that we can make marks and look at the marks, so we can make a sculpture and look at the sculpture.
Yeah, like Carl Sagan, you are a way for the universe to know itself, right?
Yeah.
So beautiful.
And I think that when you embrace that in your drawing, it's easier to let go.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing wrong you can do, because this is what the universe is doing. You know, this is how it's got to go. And then the feeling that arises is part of the same flow. So when I really learned to let go into that, I got into much broader field of subject matter and a broader field of materials and that kind of thing, because I was really just comfortable letting it arise.
I do want to talk to you a little bit about computers, since we are both, software artists, and you had some great insights in your book. One thing I love that you said, you made this connection between computer code and literature in your book, where you say that a computer program is words that do what they say.
Yeah.
Beautiful way of expressing that. So there's something, I fell in love with that when I was a kid with my Apple II. I thought it was the closest thing to mind, actually, computer code, that because it's dynamic. So can you talk a little bit about that magic? It's almost like a magic spell, the way computer code works. And also some of the problems, like the problems of having to describe images with words through code.
Yeah, that quote is Friedrich Kittler. Mm-hmm. The surprising thing about writing in its binary form is that it does what it says. He also talked about the word implementation. We talk about software implementation. We mean someone's written a piece of software, but it's also a tool like an implement. I thought that was really fun. You break into avenues, whole fields of possibility, of imaging that I never considered before, because I'm putting lines together in ways automatically that I never considered before, or on simple gestures. The hard part of that is that it's can be hard to be specific. Like you really are just exploring, so you're kind of accepting what comes and kind of seeing if you like it or not, but it's hard to get your own expression through there. And the other is, like we said before, the set of rules is the set of rules, and it's hard to break out of the set of rules and be surprised. So you work with some little automata, and it surprises you, and then you reach the limit of it, and then you rewrite it, and it surprises you again. But is it saying exactly what needs to be said? It's saying something. Is it saying exactly where you want to go, or is it rich enough, or is it resonant enough? And then how do you get it to that? And then those subtlety becomes really a thing.
Yeah.
And you really have to bring yourself back into it some way. So when I made pen plotter drawings, I'd often work on top of them. And when I make the big sculptural works, I leave room for the hand in there, because I think there's some part of the transmission that needs some kind of direct mark somewhere.
Yeah. When it comes to words that do what they say, we've now reached a great expansion of that with artificial intelligence. You don't write about this in your book, but we're at a point in history where that's coming down like an anvil on the art world. And I wanted to get your reflections on that. I know you are experimenting with AI in your own work now, and I experimented with it too, and in some ways I came to a kind of disturbing conclusion myself, which was that in the way generative AI translates words into images, it's quite, in some ways, literal. Like, in essence, what visual art is are things that can't be expressed in words.
Yes.
So I started to have this opinion that is, I think, too strong, but I like to say it, which is that it's almost like what generative visual AI creates is almost the subset of images that aren't art, because they are direct translation of words to images, that they can be expressed as, the words that produce them. I know that's a little exaggerated, but you've been thinking about this and working with the tools. What's your perspective on that relationship, maybe problematic relationship between words and images in generative AI today?
Yeah, I think last time we talked in New York, I was fairly aligned with that position.
Yeah.
We kind of came to a consensus of it. And I think what I call push button method, or the prompt to image method, I think it has those problems. It has the problems that a lot of art does, that if it has to filter through words, if meaning is assigned in the beginning and words are dictionary defined or defined by the training of the model, that they can't escape. And then lots of those works are, I just call averaging. Yeah. You're averaging all the training data into some space. So I've tried to break through that and work through that.
Mm-hmm. I want to get back to this connection between conceptual art and computer art you talk about. I really enjoyed that part of your book. You draw parallels between art, computer science, and programming by saying that in each of these the understanding only comes through doing. And I love that. I'm a big fan of Yoko Ono, John Cage, Sol LeWitt especially, like maybe the first algorithmic artist. And all of these people, they would make art that was comprised of instructions to be carried out by others or by the viewers themselves as the art.
Yeah.
So can you talk more about this connection between conceptual art, following ordered instructions, contemplation? It's a wonderful connection you make.
Well, I saw LeWitt and loved LeWitt and got to meet him and talk to him, and he was that just seemed to me kind of perfection, especially for someone who had a computer background. Mm-hmm. I could be at the highest levels of the art world. My egotistical success could be complete, and I could use a computer a generation on from LeWitt to do his kind of work. But LeWitt's systems were accomplishable by humans because he was having humans make them. So there was a limit to the complexity of what he could specify in his instructions, because he couldn't say draw 50 million lines. Mm-hmm. So I saw an opening to extend LeWitt with automation and explore conceptual image spaces that the computer could render in a way that a human couldn't. Mm-hmm. And I made this pieces called Combinations, after LeWitt's Combinations. It was an interface. It was on my website, and you could draw these lines, and then it would show you all the combinations of the lines, and it would do so many. And Sandra Gehring, my dealer, put on a show, and we had drawings by Hanna Darboven, who's another systematic artist and a daily practitioner. And then I had my combination drawings, and we had gotten Sol LeWitt allowed us to do a drawing on the wall. We hired one of his installers. Mm-hmm. It was arcs and straight lines. The wall was probably like 12 or 14 feet, and it was probably like 20 feet long, and they painted it black, and then they went with this chalk, and it took about 2 days to do. And when it was done, and I stood there, kind of overwhelmed by this drawing, the concept just meant nothing. The presence.
Yeah.
LeWitt was using concepts to create presence in a way.
The physicality of it and the way it manifests in space.
The waxiness of the crayon, the difference in my size and this size. The instruction could have been whatever. Draw 4 lines on the wall. It didn't matter. It was a specific thing, and it completed, like that was another resonant thread in the thing, and it was nice that it had this whole completion to it, and it was this whole system. There was a whole beauty in the concept. And he'd gotten a very beautiful concept perfected. And then it made this piece, like it, whatever, and when you ran the program, but the presence of the piece. And I realized, like, there's something about art and physicality which you can't separate.
Yeah. Well, probably the longest standing ordered instructions that we follow are rituals. The biggest impact on human beings is the power of ritual. It's part of the problems in society right now is a lack of ritual. Yeah. So, and that the manifestation of that ritual, the physicality of it, what made it so fantastic.
Yeah, there's Terence McKenna quotes Whitehead. It says something like, it goes through the formality of actually occurring.
Very good.
And I think that's when I sit down to draw every day, I think it's about going through the formality. Like the drawing that appears this day is the one that's gone through the formality of actually being. That's why I treasure it no matter what. If it's 2 marks on the page and that's all I could do today, that's what's formally occurred,
Yeah, ideas really are cheap, because sometimes people, they're like, I had that idea. And I said, ideas are quite cheap. You can say, flying car or world peace. Like, It's easy to have a very good idea, but to actually manifest it is the challenge, right?
And it's the whole work, and the whole world is like the details of like how the pencil's tipped and how hard you press, and all those things come into play, and all those stories and all those layers come into play. And you miss that with this is the dilemma of computer art, even with NFTs, like people buying JPEGs and all. It's like it never engages at that level, but it's its own thing, and I love it, and it's beautiful. And it's the fact that you can have an artwork that's algorithmic and it'll change, and it's in movement, and that's its qualities in some ways. A lot of the work, I did these software pieces, and then I had to keep making them more and more sculptural and more engaged, just to try to bring that material aspect and that presence of the piece. But when the pieces went from strictly on screen to being like structural, physical objects, sculptural objects, that's when they started to sell. Like that's when people got engaged with them.
Yeah, you have to see the hand of the artist.
Yeah, there was a material thing. And the presence, I think, it's like, how can you really make a work that's really present?
So in the episode that follows this one, we'll have you guide a couple of the exercises, like 3 or 4 exercises from the book. But to close off this episode, I wonder if someone wanted to try drawing their own path right now. Now's a good time, right? What's one like simple, no pressure exercise they could begin right now as this episode ends?
Yeah, well, mark making is so simple. Just making a mark and seeing what it feels like. If you want the simplest mindfulness drawing exercise, scrap of paper doesn't matter. Piece of an envelope, a paper towel, and whatever, a crayon, a pencil, do it on your iPad with your finger, but take a moment and just make contact, feel that contact, and then some movement and see what comes up. It's as simple as that. It's like in Zen, you'd say, follow your breath, and that could be 10 years of work. It's like, just notice what's coming up.
Well, yeah, if you're listening, try that. Try that. I think we all have a lot more time than we think during the day that we could subtract from social media and so on. So try that for 5 minutes after this episode's over if you're not driving and see what comes up. John, thank you so much. You're one of these people I can spend all day with, and it's always interesting and illuminating. So thank you for taking the time to talk so deeply about your work and your book.
Well, it's a pleasure to find someone interested and who's read it and has great things to talk about it with. So anytime, Scott, it's always great to talk to you.
Thanks for joining me for this interview with artist John Simon Jr. about his book and practice, Drawing Your Own Path. John has a community that meets every weekday to do the exercises from his book. Go to drawingyourownpath.com to check it out. And if you'd like to deepen your meditation practice and connect with a community exploring the ideas we share in this podcast, visit howtotrainahappymind.org. You can sign up there for our newsletter and join our Train a Happy Mind community, which offers weekly lectures, meditations, classes, and discussions. You'll also find links to purchase my book, How to Train a Happy Mind. It's a modern, non-religious approach to Buddhist wisdom with a foreword by the Dalai Lama. Available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. If this podcast has been a benefit to you, please consider supporting our nonprofit mission. How to Train a Happy Mind is a project of a skeptic's path to enlightenment. We rely entirely on the generosity of our donors to keep producing our podcast and programs that are always free and ad-free. To contribute, visit howtotrainahappymind.org. We accept cash, credit, Bitcoin, and other cryptocurrencies, and your donations are tax-deductible in the U.S. Thanks to Isabella Acebal for marketing and production on this episode. We wish you a wonderful day.